Hey, what's up guys? So today we're going to be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man number 14. I'm talking about it this week because I didn't have time to actually make a video last week when it actually came out, and I really wanted to talk about it because it was one that I was actually looking forward to because it actually pushes the story forward, the story that they basically established on the first issue. So just to give you like an idea, it took 14 issues to actually get the actual story going, but there were events that just happened in between that, I suppose, that just had to be told. Of course, to sell comics, my dudes. But anyways, of course, I'm going to be talking about the story, so of course there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't read it and you want to know what happens first before you hear me basically talk about the story, then probably do so before you listen to me talk about it. Otherwise, without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so the story is basically centered around three characters. So Ben Reilly, Peter Parker's clone, and then his girlfriend that goes by Janin, and then Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen. But we begin the story with Ben Reilly's girlfriend walking in on him, messing around with some technology that he found from the Beyond Corporation, which is something having to do with the previous Spider-Man story, so just keep that in mind. I didn't read that Spider-Man story that took place in. But Ben Reilly brings up the fact how he doesn't remember his past memories. He doesn't know anything about what happened after he came out of the Jackal's cloning tube thing, and all that he remembers is the fact that people around him just kept telling him about how he's basically fake, he's a clone, he's not the real thing, and he has some sort of sense that's calling for him to finish this technology that the Beyond Corporation started to create this portal to get him to this other dimension, which is Limbo. And like I said, she does walk in on him going off during this scenario, and she sees how crazy obsessed he is over this goal, and she looks down and she's clearly portrayed as like being sad, right? There's something going on in her head, we just don't know what that is. But of course, because I read the story already, it does get brought up further on in the comic. And then we move on to another scenario, Grand Central Station, and it's Ben Reilly's girlfriend. She's just hanging out inside of a restaurant within that train station, and it looks like one of the chefs comes up to her and or the owner, I don't know who it is, comes up to her and starts asking her questions about whether she's leaving or coming in. But at this point, it isn't mentioned. He does have like a secondary motive behind this. So he keeps asking questions to try to buy some time because he recognizes her as someone that possibly offed her father or her family. He does bring up the fact that, like, you know, she offed either the family or the father. I'm only saying that because he gets kind of cut off mid-sentence, F.A., because then she just stabs him with a fork and she just runs off. Because of course there's cops on the way, and he was just buying time for them to show up by just randomly asking this lady some questions. But yeah, she's clever enough and she figures out what he's doing and just violently escapes. This entire scenario was what I'm assuming just the writer telling us, like, yeah, she does have doubts about Ben Reilly, like, should she leave this relationship or should she stay with him throughout all this chaos that he's about to cause, even though she's sort of feeling kind of bad about something. But then she comes back into their little secret hideout. It's not established where this is. It's just their secret hideout. It's a comic book thing. Ben Reilly's asleep on his desk, I'm assuming hard at work, and just ends up falling asleep. She barges in and starts telling him about how she was feeling insecure about the situation and she had second thoughts, but now she's of course gonna stay throughout his entire reign on everything. She doesn't want to run off. She's basically telling him, like, if we have to burn down the entire world just to accomplish your goal, then we're gonna do it, and I'm down for it. And at this point, she's basically settled. And this does bring me like Peter Parker and MJ vibes back in like the old school stories when he had to like go through crazy scenarios, and of course she remained by his side. And this feels like the evil version of that, where it's like, yeah, we have this evil Peter Parker, evil Spider-Man, Chasm in this case, that's what he's called, Ben Reilly, Chasm, and we have his girlfriend that's sticking by his side, even though he wants to burn down the world to accomplish his goals. Pretty interesting dynamic there, I guess. As a superhero comic, I enjoyed that. That's pretty cool. And then we skip over to the summer season, where Ben Reilly's just standing outside of Peter Parker's apartment, just waiting to possibly get like a glimpse of Peter Parker swinging out of the building, or just in general to just catch a glimpse. And then here we get an encounter where the guy that stands outside of Peter Parker's apartment trying to collect some money that he owes comes up to Ben Reilly because he confuses him for Peter Parker, because of course he's a clone. And he's like, yo, Peter, what the heck? Where's our money, dude? And Ben Reilly just walks away and he's like, yeah, I'll make sure to tell the real Peter Parker that, dude, you owe some money. This is just a situation where Ben Reilly just walks away from. And then we skip over to basically them about to activate the portal to Limbo. They have this random piece of skin that apparently, according to the Beyond Corporation's like manifest, this particular piece of skin is like decades old. And Ben makes a point that because of the fact that it's decades old, the owner of the skin probably isn't alive and needs it anymore, so they're basically open to use it in this portal situation. So they activate it and Ben Reilly just goes through. Next page, we establish a scene of just vile looking monsters, and they're just roasting this out of frame character that we don't see for a little bit, but if you have peripheral vision like me, you can sort of glance who they're talking about by just sort of glancing down the page. And who are they roasting? It's Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen. She's just sort of hanging out underneath this tree. And then Ben Reilly just sort of strolls along and walks up to the tree and goes up to her, and he's like, mind if I grab some shade under this scary looking tree? I'm kind of new here and getting the lay of the land. In this scenario, that shit sounds hella goofy. Like, this dude just casually walks up to this tree where this random half-naked lady's just standing there, and he's like, yo, what up? But anyways, yeah, there's monsters around him, and they're also roasting him because he's nearby, and one of them calls him a counterfeit soul, and he's like, ouch, that one hit the bone. And she makes it a point to mention how she likes the insults. She likes being called all these names because it keeps her sharp. And after Ben Reilly starts hearing some of his insecurities, he starts to notice how the things that they're roasting him about, they're also sort of insulting her about. He makes it a point that they both have common insecurities, and she confirms that observation by confirming that remark he made. And then she starts like shushing him to be quiet. The monsters around them start acting weird. They each start looking at each other, and Ben's like, they're not gonna start smooching, are they? And then Madeline's like, the only thing familiarity breeds, well, you'll see. And then these monsters around them start like just completely ripping each other apart. The art style is pretty nice. Of course, they tried censoring this by making it look like their blood is purple. Would have been nice red, but I could see how it would have been purple. It's a different dimension. We're in limbo. Whatever, man. Let's make it purple. But yeah, it's like a very gruesome scene. They're just ripping each other apart. After they're done with that, Ben says, that'll keep them quiet, of course, alluding to the fact that they're all just non-existent now, I guess. And Madeline starts telling him, like, we both seem to bring each other a measure of peace, don't we? And she starts asking for his name. And he, of course, says, Ben, but she can call him Chasm. And then he starts explaining a little bit about the backstory of his name. And he says, yeah, on account of that being all that's left inside of me. You're a clone too, right? Demons kind of left that one out of the bag. And he's referring to, of course, the monsters that were around, spewing all this insecurities all around. And he says how once he lost his memories, he has been feeling pretty lost until all of a sudden he felt this need, this push to go into there. And then Madeline says, Limbo has taken on the flavor of its queen, calling others who know my pain, calling you home, saying how she attracts people with similar issues as herself into this limbo dimension. And so after reading Venom, I mean, that's probably why he's there too. But anyways, that's a different story. We're talking about Ben Reilly right now. Then Madeline starts stating like, yeah, this limbo dimension, it's probably a home for us. This is basically a place for people like her to claim that area as sanctuary. And this is basically where their alliance begins, where they're each trying to help each other accomplish each other's goals. And then we skip over to the fall season, and all three of them are having dinner on this table, super long. Ben Reilly's on one end, Madeline Pryor's on the other end, and then Ben's girlfriend is just sitting like in the middle of each other. They're all just having dinner, and she mentions how they're both welcome to stay as long as they like, of course, and she enjoyed the little incursions that they took to Earth. This brings up the events of like the free comic book day where Spider-Man just randomly just had to save this old dude from a mailbox that went AWire, and of course they were behind it. No real relevance to the story. It's just a little reference from free comic book day from this year. But anyways, they're talking about each other's plans, and she mentions how Ben wants to attack New York, of course, New York, but it's very politically complicated for her to attack New York. I don't know what her situation is. I know she has to deal with the X-Men. I'm sure it has to do with that, but she's willing to lend her army to Ben Reilly to attack New York. So she's not really attacking New York, but she is helping Ben Reilly accomplish his goals, you know, using her army. And then he's like, okay, I can use your army and you can accomplish your goals while he causes his distraction accomplishing his own goals. And then she's like, dude, I'm literally the queen of limbo. What could I possibly want? And he just says, oh, same thing I do. Of course, he brings up the fact that they're both clones. And Ben's sort of like pushing his goals and sort of making it her goals, if that sort of makes sense. Like, he's like, yeah, dude, I know you're a clone, so you must want your life back like I do. And this is where she out loud on the dinner table in front of Ben Reilly's girlfriend, she's like, dude, I whisper these secrets in your ear. Don't make me regret like coming out to you. And this is where she sort of starts developing her own evil goals, I suppose. She didn't have any before. Basically sprouted out of nowhere, probably because of Ben Reilly. She starts questioning the generosity that was bestowed upon her of the gift of the limbo dimension itself. Like, she of course rules all of limbo, and that was a gift bestowed upon her. But now she's sort of having doubts over why trust the fact that she was given this dimension to begin with. I guess that's her motive. And then we cut over to this balcony scene where Ben Reilly's girlfriend is just on the edge. She's sort of feeling down, and Madeline Pryor walks in and she's like, hey, you're upset. And she brings up the fact that she might have sort of suspicions over her and Ben Reilly. And then she's like, if you think I have designs on your beloved, you needn't worry. I played that game before and lost badly. Once bitten, twice shy. And then she's like, dude, it's gonna take a lot more than a fancy castle to come between me and Ben Reilly. We've been through things you couldn't imagine. And then Madeline goes, but if envy doesn't redden your face, what does? So starts speaking out over her feeling helpless over the fact that she's just human. She has like these super powered beings around her. She wants to help out Ben. She knows that he wants to go to war, but she feels helpless just standing on the sidelines because she's human. And Madeline's like, oh man, I knew I liked you. And this is where Madeline Pryor has this comparison with Janin. She likes the fact that they both don't like things just happening around them. She likes the fact that Janin just wants to be able to take control over things happening around her. She likes the fact that Janin just wants to take control over her life. So Madeline brings out this finger inside of a box. And this is where I go like, dude, I've seen this before in that one anime Come on, man. But apparently it's just a tribute that Madeline collected from its previous owner, and she explains it as the thing that set her free previously. Janin sort of starts feeling questionable over this, but Madeline's like, dude, if you want this power that's in this, you basically have to want it. You have to ask for it. So she has to be in like a specific mindset where she's allowing this power to sort of be a part of her. And so Janin instantly changes her mind and starts asking for this power. So Madeline just jabs it into her chest, and Janin sort of starts transforming now. They go through this weird ritual where they're describing, I guess, maybe something in her personality, that maybe she switches faces from person to person, maybe? Because they're making a point out of this new, like, superhero or villain in this case, or anti-hero, I don't know, but they're making a point over how she's able to just change her face, I'm assuming as a disguise, but of course it's Halloween themed, right? So this new villain slash anti-hero is now called Hallows Eve, and this is the first appearance of this character. Hallows Eve is Janin, Ben Reilly's girlfriend. So now she's a key player in this story. Now she has the actual power to possibly change how this outcome is gonna go. She's no longer human. And then we skip over to winter, and I'm assuming Ben Reilly's hanging out outside of Peter Parker's apartment again, just because of what happens next. He's sort of in his own thoughts. He's questioning whether he remembers about whether he likes the snow or not, because it's coming down hard. There's no one out on the streets, it's late in the evening, and it's just him pondering his thoughts. And out of nowhere, he just hears this phrase, "It's time to pay, Peter." And Ben turns around and he says, "I was thinking the same thing." And this is where the debt collector makes an appearance. He's hassling Ben Reilly again. And he starts telling Ben like, "Man, I've talked to a lot of people you know, and they all say you're a good guy, but I know you're just a deadbeat muff." And then he's like, "How does it feel to be a fake Peter Parker?" And Ben takes that personally. He's like, "Did you just call me a fake Peter Parker?" But the debt collector's also raising his voice. He's like, "Stop acting stupid. I know who you are, and I know what you are. If you don't want the whole world to know, you better." And this is where Ben just cuts the sad dude off. Like, he goes off on him. He grabs him by the shirt and just tosses him into the ground and just starts pounding him. And I'm sure at this point he's just unconscious, because like there's no sound coming out of him. Ben's just like, "Oh man, what a great way to end the day." And Ben picks him up and he claims how he likes to offer this gentleman an opportunity. So he brings him over to Limbo, and Madeline is just hanging out near this different tree from before, but it's just another tree. There's weird fruit hanging from it. It looks like a brain. She claims how it looks very nice, but looks can be deceiving. And I believe this entire scenario is to have the debt collector try the fruit itself as an experiment. So Ben Reilly and Hallows Eve bring over this debt collector to Madeline prior to the tree. They make it a point that Ben kisses his girlfriend, Hallows Eve. It's so adorable, it's kind of funny. It reminds me of the Carnage story from like the original Spider-Man run back in, what was it, the 80s, 90s, something like that. The original comic run with Carnage, where he just completely obliterates New York. And that entire family dynamic that happened there. But anyways, Madeline starts talking to the debt collector. She starts bringing up the fact how the debt collector is no stranger to being in this area. I'm assuming being in a dark place, personality-wise, maybe? I don't know. But they bring up the fact how he has special tools in his attic. And she starts calling him like a naughty boy. So this debt collector has some crazy shenanigans up his own sleeve, like his own life. And so he acknowledges this, right? And Madeline starts offering the debt collector the fruit from the tree that I just mentioned. And she starts saying how if he eats it, it'll liberate him. If he eats it, it'll set him free. And he's like, I can go home, right? And she makes it a point, like, you can go free. So he's like, oh, okay. He eats the fruit and his soul just gets extracted from his body and lands right onto her hand. And Madeline says, to inhale that soul is to know everything about that person. And so she catches a little whiff of the debt collector's soul, and she makes a point how that dude was really evil. So that basically leaves it off to our imagination over the kind of man that this debt collector was. That's pretty crazy, to be honest, but I figured there'd be kind of more to that guy, but they probably didn't want to put in the effort. But that's kind of dark, to be honest, still. And Ben realizes that this is gonna be the technique that they're gonna use to extract Peter Parker's soul so that Ben Reilly can inhale his soul but anyways, that's his goal. This is how he's gonna know what he previously forgot. And the last page just gives us a little brief summary over both of their goals. Madeline Pryor wants to find out whether Limbo was given to her to rule or to just simply hide away and not bother anyone else. That's her goal. And it looks like Hallows Eve is gonna join her in her quest to accomplish that goal. And Ben, he's not gonna rest until his prey has tasted Limbo's fruit. And he's gonna take all that he is. And the story ends with basically to be continued in the next Dark Web event, which is the comic that's coming out next week, Dark Web #1, which is the real start of this whole shebang story. Damn, this was a long one. This one had quite a bit to unpack. They definitely try to condense a lot of story into this, and it kind of shows, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great comic. I did notice that there were multiple art styles throughout the story. So like, for example, the few pages where it's just a little bit about Ben Reilly's girlfriend, Janin, it had a very simplistic art style where it still portrayed the story very well. And then once the seasons changed to summer, then the art style changed again, and it gave it more of a different feel to the story. And I noticed that the art style basically changed whenever they were showing off like the Limbo dimension. And whoever they set to draw that made it look very nice, very gruesome, like what you'd expect the Limbo dimension to look like. And it looks pretty hardcore. The artist did a very good job with that. Or actually, now that I'm scrolling through the comic itself a little bit more, it's making a little bit more sense over the art style changes. So because there's sort of like 3 characters in this story, right? The Ben Reilly, Janin, and Madeline Pryor. But the actual story is centered around the 2 specific characters, Ben and Janin. So whenever it's centered around Janin, the art style is sort of more simplistic and easier to convey. But then when it's centered around Ben Reilly, it heavily changes. And it just conveys like a completely different tone. And that's great. I didn't actually realize that until just now. I didn't realize the art style changed, because that's like a night and day sort of difference. But I didn't realize it changed depending on the person that the story was following. That's pretty cool. But yeah, those 2 artists actually conveyed the story pretty well on those 2 different perspectives, so that was well done. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Overall, it was a great comic. I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Although some of these goals for these characters are a little goofy, it is in the traditional like Marvel manner where, yeah, it's goofy, but we're still gonna get some crazy action done, you know, so that's alright with me. And this one definitely hit all those check boxes. So like I said, I can't wait for the Dark Web event #1 that's coming out next week, so we'll see how that story plays out there. But anyways, yeah, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about this comic, and if you want to hear more about it, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.